Well, thanks once again for coming. It's always hard to drag yourselves out of your houses and your gardens on such a nice summer's evening. We really do appreciate you coming along to share the information we've got to give to you tonight and to ask questions and discuss anything of interest. It's really split into two parts. The first part is me giving a brief update on our Ofsted Action Plan, which I introduced at the Parents Forum last term, which I remember looking around the room tonight. Several of you were there for that at least. And after that, Ms Wolf will lead an information session on homework in the school, along with Mr Lamb, head of the English faculty, who will give specific examples of homework in his subject area. We want to hear your questions, of course we do. Any specific issues about your son particularly and his experience, we'd appreciate if you could leave that to speak to us individually after the general session is over, but we really want you to ask questions about either thing that is presented tonight so that everyone can share all of the information. So me first, and the Ofsted Action Plan I shared with you at the Parents Forum last term, those of you who were here, and it was shared with all parents after that event. And we were very clear that we want to make sure that parents are fully informed about how things are going, not in a technical detail sense, in terms of how we would share it with governors, which is happening once every half term. I have to say, we're on to our third one coming up next week with the monitoring board for the school improvement plan, but in a way that you can understand and in a sense give you a flavour of what has happened and what we're doing to make sure that when Ofsted come back for their one-day monitoring visit, which we think will be next term, and for the full inspection, which we think will be in 2024, we could be confident that we're on the right track for that. So let's get going. There were three major things that came up on the Ofsted report. The first one was the quality of education, where they said that it was inconsistent and some subjects were poorly planned and others were poorly implemented or taught. There were inconsistencies in that, and they were after more consistency across the board. What we said we'd do to address that in the action plan were those three areas. So we'd bring in a common lesson structure for all lessons across the school that all teachers followed. That every lesson starts the same way, ends the same way, and has a period of focused silent work and retrieval of subject knowledge from previous lessons. That we'd look at subject content or the curriculum to make sure that all subjects were compliant with the national curriculum and also were very ambitious in the kind of work they set for boys to do. And finally, our monitoring processes would make sure that those things were looked at very, very regularly and in a rigorous way to make sure that what we wanted to happen was happening. So they're the three major tenets of the school improvement plan for quality of education, and here's where we are at the minute. So every subject has reviewed its curriculum in matching it against the national curriculum to make sure it's absolutely compliant with that, and also to make sure that it's as ambitious as it possibly can be. How have we done that? Well, we've had people, faculty leaders and their teams looking at each other's curriculums to compare what they're doing with boys and to make sure that the stuff they're putting in front of them is absolutely stretching them to the maximum it possibly can. For the subjects, secondly, which came in for criticism in the report that were named, we've had external people in to look at that curriculum, so external consultants, either through a local teaching hub school, which is the new organisation by the government for schools supporting schools, which is based in the charter schools in Dulwich, or through other subject specialist organisations. So we're casting a dispassionate eye from outside the school on what we're doing to make sure that it's in line with what other people are doing. And in both of those cases, for all subjects and for the specific subjects, we've had very positive reports about what we've done to those curriculum areas. In terms of the teaching or the implementation of those curriculum areas, we monitor lessons every half term in a window of 2 or 3 weeks, where all teachers' lessons are visited. And what we see is that the common lesson structure that we introduced in January is really being well embedded and well delivered in the vast, vast majority of lessons. And if it's not, then we work with teachers to make sure they're supported to do that. But we're really pleased with how that's come in a very short time since we've implemented it. These are big changes, and I have to say both these changes and the ones around behaviour we were bringing in anyway, regardless of Ofsted, but we're really pleased with the way both staff and students have engaged with them to make them become more and more part of what's going on every day in school. We've taken staff and student feedback on those things, and they've both been very positive about the impact that's having on both teaching and learning in respect of what students experience. So we're happy with how that's gone so far. Next thing that came up was SEND provision. And what the thrust of what Ofsted was saying was that SEND provision for students in mainstream lessons could be better, and that teaching materials and teaching methods could be better adapted to meet the needs of all SEND students in all lessons. So again, what we've done is a couple of things. We've had external input into that from Lewisham Council. They've done an audit of our SEND provision across the school, which was done in the spring term, not long after we did some input on that with teachers. We absolutely used that to make sure that we were informing what we were doing with teachers in terms of training. So, as well as the external audit, for which the final report hasn't been produced yet, we've had draft feedback on it. We wanted to provide training for all staff so that they could ensure they know the needs of all SEND students in their class. And so that would be based on good communication about those needs from a central database and through the SENCO, to make sure that when a class arrives to you as a teacher, you know that there are maybe 5 SEND students in there and you know what their specific needs are. And then equipping the teachers to meet those needs through teaching strategies and methodology, so that when those boys come back time after time, teachers are equipped to be able to meet their needs. So how have we got on with that? So as I say, Lewisham did an audit of our SEND provision, and it was completed in the spring term. We've had verbal feedback and a draft report, but not the final report yet. But what it says is that they were pleased with the range of strategies they saw teachers using to support SEND boys in their classrooms, which was good for us because Ofsted had taken a very dim view of that, I have to say, and we wanted to make sure that we were on the right track with ensuring that those boys' needs are met, because it's very important to me and to all staff in the school that the needs of all students are being met. We've had some training for staff from the SENCO, by the SENCO and her team, around how to meet the needs of various different learning difficulties in your classroom, with strategies to use, materials to use, etc. Thirdly, we've looked at our database of SEND students in the school to make sure it's more accessible, more easy to use, more easy to get information from, and we're very pleased with what's happened with that. And again, our quality assurance processes, we're on the third, we've done 3 now, 3 half-termly reviews of teaching, and we're happy with how the provision for SEND students has improved time after time in those QA processes to give us confidence that that's on the way up and in the right direction, and we're pleased with that too. Finally, the third thing that was up for improvement following Ofsted was consistency of behaviour across the school, and what they said was there were high expectations, but not always were they implemented consistently by teachers, leading to some low-level disruption. What have we done? External support, you'll see that's a key area in all 3 of these areas for improvement. We want to get external eyes on the school, so that it's not us marking our own homework, if you'll excuse the pun, in the context of what we're doing tonight. It's other people looking at what we're doing and giving us their view about that. So we've got an external consultant coming into it with Ian Hairsign, who's leading, the deputy head teacher sitting over there, leading on behaviour. He's a former head teacher from a school of many years, with the kind of expertise in behaviour policy and implementation, and he's been working with Ian since Christmas really, about how to get our policy, our new policy and our new expectations embedded and implemented and then developed, and that's been very successful. And he's produced reports for the governors about how that's going. We overhauled the behaviour policy to make it much more understandable and accessible. It went down from how many pages, Ian? 60 odd to...
Yeah, about 60 to about 70, 80.
Yeah, so we've made it really much more easy to understand for everybody concerned. And if you ever read the old one, it was a long read. This one's much shorter and more pithy, and it is very clear about what expectations are for all parties involved in behaviour, teachers, students, leaders, etc. So simplified rules, simplified routines about behaviour at the start and end of lessons and around the school and during lessons, and then a monitoring of that through data collected around pupil-centred referral, which is being sent out of a lesson for misbehaviour, pupils in detention, pupils being excluded either internally or externally. We've had behaviour training for staff regularly and making sure that we are looking very closely at how they're implementing these policies, again, through our QA system. What has it shown us? The work with the external consultant has been very good. It's brought expertise in from outside the school, new ideas that we can use around how teachers implement policies, around organisation of systems in the school. That's been very good. We show a really good establishment of the behaviour protocols about how boys enter lessons, sit down to work in lessons and leave lessons and move around the building. And that has shown us, as well as our monitoring of lessons, sort of not anecdotally, but sort of in a qualitative way. If we look at the data, the number of boys being sent out of lessons, the number of boys being in detention, and the number of boys being excluded has fallen since these things have been introduced. So, what I'm trying to get across is, this is the start. We're sort of two and a bit terms into this. They're big changes. They're quite substantial changes. They're changes that would have happened anyway, but there's a new imperative for us to get them established as quickly as possible and to show results as quickly as possible. And we're pretty pleased with the way things have gone so far, is my message to you. And I'm trying to put that in as simple and understandable a way as possible. We will report back to all parents in a written form at the end of this term. You've got a document at the end of last term about what we were going to do. We'll have another QA cycle, another session of monitoring of lessons, etc. It's going to start in a couple of weeks this half term, and we'll put all that stuff together and give you a final end of academic year view of how things have gone with our plan. I hope that's clear. There are still things to do, of course. There are still things that we want to work on. There are still teachers who need support with various things, but we're putting in that support as rapidly and in as targeted a way as possible. And we want to see impact that is noticeable for all people involved with the school, me, teachers, pupils, you, governors. I'm happy to take questions about that generally. Any more specific questions about your own son, I'll take afterwards. Floor's open. Yeah. If there aren't any questions then, I'm going to hand over to Miss Wolf, Deputy Head Teacher who leads on homework, and she's going to be talking about our policy, how homework is handled in the school, and in the middle of her presentation I think Mr. Lamb's going to come and talk about English specifically, and again then there'll be a chance for you to ask questions.
Evening everyone. So I'm going to give you an overview of homework, and during the presentation I hope that I'm going to cover a lot of the questions that you have. So I think the first thing is why set homework, and I think this slide really does sum that up. But to give you some information, to give you more detail about that, this list actually comes from our school homework policy, which can be found on the website. So I think the first reason is to consolidate the learning that's taking place in lessons. So, if you're learning how to solve quadratic equations, for example, you do need lots of practice, and homework is obviously perfect for that. And practice and repetition underpins successful learning, and homework is the perfect vehicle for that. Homework can allow learning to be extended, so students can maybe use online resources to look at topics in more depth and to really explore them. And then there's organisation and revision. So if you're a Year 11 parent, you will know that Year 11s are currently taking between 8 and 9 GCSEs, and that's 22 separate exam papers on average. So the organisational, the time management and the revision skills that students need to be started, need to be developed from Year 7 onwards, and homework, again, is the way in which we start that process. And finally, there are activities that can only be done through homework. So maybe keeping a record of the food you eat for a science topic, for example. So homework allows you to do those things. So there are, I think you will know how often we set homework probably. If Key Stage 4 students, it's 1 homework per week per subject, except for combined science, in which case students have 2 homeworks, 1 from each teacher. For Key Stage 3, for some practical subjects we don't set homework, things like music, PE, but for English, maths, science, history, it's 1 homework per week. For modern foreign languages, it's 1 homework. Geography's 1 homework fortnightly in Year 7, and RE and computer science, because they only have 1 period a week, as geography does at the moment in Year 7. It's only once a fortnight. So how do we set homework? I think you'll all be familiar with Show My Homework, or Satchel 1, as it's now called. And it's a very good app. And if you're not familiar with it, and you don't routinely look at it, then I would strongly suggest that you do. And teachers set the homework, they record the homework they set on Show My Homework. And what type of homework do we set? So this list comes from 1 student, and I looked at the homework that he had over the previous 2 or 3 weeks, and you can see there's quite a range there. So it's quite a varied diet that we do give students. I think in Year 10 and 11 though, it does become more exam focused. Now, I do just want to mention quizzes, and I want to make it absolutely clear that a constant diet of quizzes is not our policy. But having said that, quizzes do have their place. I mean, a large part of sort of being successful and learning well is to practice what you're doing. And if you think about learning Spanish vocabulary, for example, a quiz is an excellent way of doing that. And the research shows that a well-designed multiple choice quiz really does test how well students apply information and gives teachers and students a lot of information. But I do want to make it clear that quizzes, the continual data quizzes is not what we expect, but there is you'll hear a little bit more about English in a moment, the very particular use of quizzes. So what happens once homework has been set? And I think this is a topic that we get most questions on. So firstly, I want to make it absolutely clear that our expectation is that teachers check that homework has been completed. They should be doing that. When they've set homework, the next lesson, or when it's due, they should be going around and in one way or another ensuring that homework has been done. And if it hasn't, then detention or possibly contacting home or extension, there'll be some way of dealing with that. We do get a lot of questions about homework marking, and I want to explain how that works and to give you a bit of context around that. So, in primary school, a teacher will have 1 class of 30 pupils, and they're able to therefore mark a lot of the work that the boys or students do, and provide a lot of written feedback. But in a secondary school, it is different. Teachers teach far more classes for far less time and see far more students. So I think on average, teachers tend to teach 6 to 8 different teaching groups. And in the course of a week, they could be teaching maybe 300 different students. One member of staff in the school teaches 447 different students a week. So you can probably see that it's simply not possible for teachers to mark every single piece of homework that is set. They have to be much more selective about the work that they will mark. So those could be pieces of classwork, it could be homework possibly, but they have to choose the bits that will have most impact on pupil progress and give them most information about how students are doing. But that doesn't mean that students aren't getting their work marked and they're not getting feedback on their work. And I want to explain some of the ways in which that happens. So one of the most common ways is that students mark their own work. So the teacher will check it's been done, and then they will go through the work. You can think about the maths worksheet, for example. They go through the work on the board, explain how each problem is solved. The boys will correct it in green pen. That's why green pen is part of our school equipment. And they'll be able to ask questions, and they'll understand where they went wrong and where they went right. Peer assessment. Now that's where students mark each other's work. And this is set up very carefully by the teacher so that students fully understand the work and the marking is accurate. And it is a very good and powerful way of learning for both the marker and the boy whose work is being marked. And that's the point, you see. The source of feedback doesn't matter as long as the feedback or the marking allows the student to do better next time, to improve. So if the teacher's explaining how to do a particular maths problem or how to, balance a chemical equation, and the student now knows and knows what to do next time, then the feedback is being effective. And teachers will always know what students are doing. They'll have a good record from the bits of work they do mark and all the other ways that they gather information about students. Online quizzes, students get instant feedback, and the teachers will also look at the results, and it gives teachers a lot of information. Revision or learning homework, where you get feedback from the results from the test. So I think when parents feel that homework's not being taken in or marked, maybe there's another set of questions that needs to be asked, which is, well, did the teacher check you'd completed the homework? Did the teacher go through it? Did you mark it? Did you swap books and mark it? Of course, I know that there will be instances where, it appears that that hasn't happened. And what I would say is, please do contact me, and I will investigate and find out what's going on. So I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Lamb, who's going to talk to you a little bit about English homework specifically.
Good evening, everyone. So, as Ms. Wolf mentioned, I'm going to speak to you very briefly about English homework. And we set homework in English for several reasons, but I think the most important reason is it lets you know what your son is studying in class, and that can really help you support your son in his learning. But crucially for English, it helps build vocabulary, and specifically English-based English subject vocabulary. This is done through English homework, weekly library reading homework, which is monitored by your son's library teacher. But maybe I say it all the time, but I'm going to say it again. Ultimately, reading is the best homework possible to improve vocabulary, comprehension, and even imagination. And I can't emphasize the importance of reading enough to succeed in English. Teachers set detentions for those students who do not complete homework. And even this very afternoon, the majority of students in an English detention were for those who did not complete their homework, and they weren't too happy. Now, as part of our weekly homework, we also have vocabulary quizzes, which Ms. Wolf mentioned. Each piece of homework has a vocabulary quiz attached to it, which checks the students understand key ideas and concepts which we're studying in class at the moment. At one point, students thought that quizzes were it. They logged on, they did the quiz, and they thought they were done. And some parents fed back to us, some students fed back to us, and what we did is we changed the way we presented homework so it's absolutely clear that the students do the task they're supposed to do, and the quiz is a supplemental piece of work. Equally important, but not the main task at all. Now, I want to speak a bit more about vocabulary and what we do in English. So, the words that we quiz the students on become increasingly complex. I have an example here on the board, excuse me, the whiteboard, of how we teach tragedy, the concept of tragedy, to a Year 7 student and to a Year 12 student. And you can see on the board how even though we look at the same word every single year, Year 7, 8, 9, right the way to A-level, the meanings and the nuance changes. So we need to reinforce the concepts and the ideas almost constantly, right the way through school, to make sure that they don't forget what they've learned in previous years. Right. Now, English has 3 rotating tasks. So these are pretty much every single week we rotate between summarizing specific information, independent and guided research, and extended writing. Okay. So I'm going to go through each one of these and explain to you how they work. All right, this is a research and reading task. Our research and reading tasks are monitored through discussion and teacher checks. When we are, for example, teaching Animal Farm, we ask students to research the life of George Orwell, and when they complete this homework, they're able to hold meaningful discussions and write more sophisticated ideas in their classwork, and most importantly, their end-of-year assessments. Now we have a student over here who very diligently did the homework and wrote down 6 or 7 pieces of information about George Orwell's life. This would be out in class, and the teacher would walk around and make sure this homework is done. Then we'd ask the students to please think about the information you found and decide which are the 2 most important pieces of information. And the students over here, you can see little stars over there, decided that those 2 pieces of information were the most important. And we have a conversation in the class about, was this the most important, why is this important, etc. And then boys also share ideas. And you can see at the very bottom there, he's taken a piece of information from a peer and added it to his work. So we've done a couple of things there. We've checked the homework's done, we've secured the knowledge, and also through peer review, we've actually improve the homework to some point. So reading and researching is really important. Right. The second thing we do is extended writing. When the students write their extended pieces of homework, at least 1 page of written work, this helps them develop stamina and the skills they need for 5 long piece essays that they write at the end of Year 11. Today was the Year 11 exam, and each boy in Year 11 had to write 2 4- or 5-page essays. So it's just really improving their stamina. Now, once students do write their long homework piece, the teacher checks the work is done in class. The teacher then provides whole class targets. Targets are what you need to do to improve your writing. And I have a couple of examples over here. Has your partner varied your sentence length? Have you varied your sentence length? Have you used metaphors and similes? And the teachers would provide these criteria before the homework is actually set. Now the student over here, once again diligently did the homework, a full page of writing, but if you can strain your eyes and see, the last paragraph, although I'm sure it's full of wonderful ideas, there's absolutely no punctuation, and it's just 1 full sentence. Okay? So teachers would, ask students to look at their partner's work, think very carefully about it, and then peer assess and think about what targets they can apply to that work. Teachers have visualizers in English, which means we can live mark with a camera. And so teachers may mark a couple of pieces so everyone gets an idea of what should be done. That way, everyone gets feedback, and gets targets on how they can improve. So to summarize, we have reading, research, and extended writing, alongside weekly vocabulary quizzes. But most importantly, and I think you all know what I'm going to say, the key to English success, improving imagination, comprehension, the works, is regular reading. Thank you.
Right, so just to continue with this, I want to talk about why homework sometimes doesn't get set. And what I'd say is that no system is foolproof, unfortunately. And when it comes to homework, the reality is that sometimes things do go wrong. And there'll be occasions when it doesn't get set. And that will be the same in any school, I'm sure. Why does this happen? I think the most common reason is teacher illness. If teachers are ill, subject leaders will try their best to make sure the homework is still set, but when they've got to set cover work and organise that's the priority, and it just sometimes doesn't happen. And the other reason is that where you have classes where you have more than one teacher taking the same group, sometimes there can be confusion about whose turn it is to set homework. Subject leaders work really hard to try and put in place systems that prevent that, but sometimes it just happens. The reason I know that is because every week we check the homework that's been set, and when I investigate, and when faculty leaders investigate, those are the most common reasons. So lastly, what can parents do? What can you do to support? I think that firstly, please do raise concerns. If you've got real concerns about homework, let me know, let the faculty leader know, let the head of year know, and we will investigate it and see what's going on. Check Show My Homework. If you've got a problem with Show My Homework, we've got Nicola Gray, our receptionist, sitting over there, and she can help you with parental logins and things like that. You have a parental login, but your son has a different login, and it's really quite useful for you to know both logins and to make sure you are using the correct one. If it's possible, and I know how difficult it is when you're working full-time and you've got children and so on, but if you can set up the expectation that your child will show you their homework, that is really helpful. And as they get older, I know we think as parents, well, you know, I can let them get on with it. Sadly, that's often not the case, and the opposite's true. The opposite is the case, and I can speak from experience as a parent and a teacher. It might be time when you need to actually keep a closer eye on what they're doing. If they do have a quiet space to work, that's brilliant. Support them if you can. Please don't actually do the homework for them. Establishing a routine is very helpful. We do have Homework Club, which runs every day except Friday in the library, and there are always adults there who can help with the homework. And lastly, I would like to, I've got 2 Year 11 groups, and I'm thinking about what they've been through over the past 2.5 years, and how hard they're working now, and how much their parents have helped them in that. So I just want to thank parents for the support that you give students and give us when it comes to homework. It's invaluable, and it really does make an incredible difference.